Today, we're going to be checking out the Fortin 14 Overdrive. So I was hoping that they would release something like this because, for those that don't know, for a while they had a thing going on with Godlike where they were modding actual Ibanez TS9s and TS808s. As a matter of fact, I actually have one here. I've demoed it on the channel, and it's one of my favorite overdrives ever. I've always described it as having the sauce, you know. It's got that nice, aggressive, upper mid-range bite, you know, really modern metal thing that Fortin is known for. But what I like about it, and what I think a lot of other people like about it, is a lot of the Fortin stuff tends to be super tight and modern, really dry. This is not that at all. This has plenty of low end while still, you know, being chunky. So don't worry, it's not going to be like farty or anything, but it's still, you know, really full and aggressive, but also just crazy saturated. It also has just buckets of output. And then they announced earlier this year that they were going to stop that collaboration. And I was like, oh man, I really hope they put out like an Overdrive that's got some of that stuff in it, because that thing is awesome. And lo and behold, shortly after they announced the 14. So it has that TS9 in there. It also has the TS8. You can select that from the switches here. And I would have been enough. I would have been like, okay, perfect. Let's buy it. I'll pick it up because of just how good the TS9 is. And I've heard great things about the TS808 as well that they modded. But then they just threw in the hex drive, something I demoed on the channel a while back. I don't currently have one right now, but it was a great overdrive, really cool take on a Tubescreamer style circuit. And it was definitely a little bit left of center in terms of Tubescreamers. And they threw that in here as well. And I think that that is killer. So of course I jumped on this immediately. I didn't get my video out for it right away. I wanted to have some time with it, kind of play around with it, and I'm glad I did. Like I've really grown to love this thing, and this one's gonna finally kick this off on my board, only because this is in here. This is now gonna live on my board, and what's cool about it is it has the on off, but then it has channels on here, channels 1 and 2. That's why you have 6 set of knobs, essentially drive, level, and tone, drive, tone, level, you know, whatever. On the top and bottom here, it's just because it's channel 1 and 2, green and red on here, so you can visually see where you're at. And that allows you to have 2 different overdrive sounds. So like, I don't know if you want to have like one for like more of a lead thing and one for more of a rhythm thing, you can do that. It also has this jack on the side, which a lot of their pedals do. So you can actually set this up so when you turn it on, it can change channels on your amplifier as well. So you can go from like a clean sound over to a distorted sound and stuff like that. But what's really cool about having the two different overdrive sounds, since there's 3 different overdrives in here, each channel can be one of the 3. So you can set them up differently, and you can have, you know, maybe one with a bunch of gain on it and stuff, and maybe a little less brightness if you want to do some leads or something like that, or maybe just a less hot overdriven sound. So I think that's pretty cool. And then of course, my first question was, how close is it actually to the TS9 modded that they did before? And it's basically dead on. You'll hear when I'm going to do a little bit of a comparison, both as a boost into a high gain amplifier and on a clean channel, so you can hear how they sound. And the TS9 one is maybe just like a couple of percent louder and a couple percent brighter, and that's probably just down to tolerances, like part tolerances in these always kind of varying up and down. So one thing I do in the out of mix just to compensate for that is I just bump the level ever so slightly and the tone on this, and then it matches. It feels exactly the same. It sounds exactly the same. So that's awesome. Now, I don't have a TS808 to compare it to, or like I said, I don't have the hex drive anymore, but the hex drive performs just how I remember. I ended up setting it up very similar to how I used to have my old one back in the day. So that shows me that they really nailed what they were going for there. And of course they did. It's their own. And then the TS808 modded that's in here, I had heard that one was like even higher output and like maybe a little bit more noisy because it's more saturated. There's like more compression and distortion going on. And boy, is it. Oh, wow. A couple of my guitar buddies that have both of the old modded pedals were telling me that the 808 is just like even more over the top. So it's not like you're just getting like, I know a lot of people will be like, well, it's a TS9 and 808. It's basically the same thing in there. No, there are definitely different mods going on. You'll definitely get different stuff out of here. Like I would use the TS9 more for, you know, like a rhythm overdrive, and then probably the TS808, since it's more over the top and saturated, for something like a lead overdrive if I was good at those widdlies. But you'll hear, I'll play in the out of mix and even show you like the difference in just kind of like output and noise difference from the 8 and the 9, because I can literally just go between it with a switch. So we'll check that out as well. That's basically it. You know, even though it's just a bunch of overdrives, it's pretty simple, but it's quickly become one of my favorite overdrive pedals ever, just because you have so many options and can switch between them here. And like I said, that TS9, the modded one they did, was so good. But for the in-mix, I had this running into the BE channel of my Friedman BE50 Deluxe, because I wanted to show how I could take that thing from being very much dad rock on that channel. It's how I have it set up to either be dad rock or boosted, into basically like searing like thrash and death metal, and this took it there immediately. Problem is I can't use that amp for the out of mix, because unfortunately, and as much as I love this beautiful amplifier, it's one of my favorite amps of all time, I got it during COVID, and there were some bad parts and stuff during COVID, and there were some bad caps that were going out on these amps, and unfortunately there was a problem with some of the caps before, or maybe a cap or something, and nothing was sounding right. I had to diagnose it with Dave Friedman a little over a year ago, sent it to him to repair. He did. It's been sounding great, but that problem has come back now, and it did that when I was sitting down to do the out of mix stuff and play around with all the knobs and stuff on here. So while I have it sounding searingly good for the in mix, it seems another cap has gone bad on me, and I'm gonna have to get that repaired, hopefully for the last time, because I adore this amplifier and use it all the time on the channel. But that being said, for the boosting high gain stuff for the out of mix, we're gonna have that go into the blue channel of my EVH 5153, which sounds stupid good boosted by this thing. Absolutely insanely good. And then just to hear this thing as an actual overdrive, we're going to go into the clean channel of my Lischlerin Prometheus, which is a great clean and takes overdrive super good. And you'll be able to kind of hear that. And like I said, I'll compare a little bit with the TS9, the modded TS9, so you can hear that it really is captured in here. It's definitely going to be a 1-to-1 kind of thing, you know, -2 or +2% or whatever from the different part tolerances. And then of course I'm going to be plugging into this with my LTD MT1, my McThompson signature that does have his signature Fishman in the bridge, and we're going to be doing that for all the examples just like I did in the in mix. So that is all of the settings and features. Oh yeah, and then of course all of those amps and everything are going into my Two Notes Captor X, which does have a DV77 and VM1265 IR blend. It's mostly the DV77. Do have a Dropbox link down below below if you want to check that out. But now that's all the features and everything. Let's just hear it outside of a mix and turn some knobs and hear how gloriously brutal this sounds. So much output, so much aggression while still retaining plenty of low end, which I think is a big problem for like overdrives and Tubescreamers with a lot of people, that it shaves off too much low end. I don't think you're going to have that problem here, but the hex drive still has, you know, plenty of tight low end. It's definitely tighter than the other two, so you have the option to have a more modern tight overdrive while also having things that are a bit more full as well. Speaking of the difference between the two, I think you were able to hear that the amount of gain on tap and the amount of volume on tap was significantly higher with the TS9 and TS808 modded sections than the hex drive that's on here. And I think you were able to hear pretty clearly the difference between the TS9 and TS808 and the amount of like output and saturation and compression and everything with just all the extra noise you got on the blue channel of that EVH. I'm in love with the thing. This is definitely not going to leave my board unless he does something else where he just adds more drives to it. This is going to stay put. And of course, you know, still love my boy here, but now I get that plus more in this thing, so it's pretty killer. Especially that it can take a Friedman from, you know, playing old Van Halen and rock and roll music into I could chug death metal on that all day. Is pretty sick. But would love to know your thoughts if you tried any of the other ones, or if you've been curious about that, or if you haven't found the right overdrive or right Fortin drive for you. I highly recommend this thing. It is super killer and I'm very happy with it. But would love to know your comments down below. Thanks for watching. Stay metal.